Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who came here today. My name is Bryan Caforio. I'm a Democrat running for Congress in this seat. It's really important to have events like this, and I appreciate you taking the time to come to ask us questions, to hear from all the candidates, and to have the opportunity to see who most aligns with your values for the June and November election. I'm a Southern California native, born and raised. My parents were both public school teachers. My mom taught special education in 3rd and 4th grade. My dad was a high school English teacher. And they taught me at a very early age the value of hard work and the benefits that come with a good public education. So put those two things together, was able to get an academic scholarship to UCLA, where I met my wonderful wife, Lisa, who is here today after braving through traffic. Then went to, thank you for pointing that out, Pets. Then went to Yale Law School and worked for a United States federal judge before coming back to Southern California and practicing over the last few years in lawsuits going against some of the biggest banks and wealthiest corporations in America. And what I saw on an almost daily basis was just how many people were being taken advantage of because the rules had been written against their favor by career politicians in Washington who were looking out for their biggest donors instead of the people in the community. And so Lisa and I decided, instead of doing this one case at a time, one client at a time, let's work to build a better system. Let's fight for that economy that works for everyone and not just the wealthy few. That means raising the minimum wage, because no person should work a full-time job and live in poverty. It means once and for all ending wage discrimination, because when I think about my 14-year-old niece, Summer, and the fact that in a few years, some boss of hers might think it's okay to pay her less money than a guy doing the same job simply because she's a young lady, that's wrong, and I'm going to fight against that. And it means strengthening and securing Social Security and Medicare, because we need to preserve and protect that sacred promise to our seniors to make sure they are taken care of in their later years. Now, I'm proud to have the support of Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, the California Labor Federation, National Nurses, SEIU, the Teamsters, Equality California, Planned Parenthood, and many more. And I look forward to hearing all of your questions today, and I hope to earn your support in June and again in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Question and answer.
I'm asking you the same question. Would you vote for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and why or why not?
Sure. So the Conservation Fund, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a program put in place. It takes fees paid by oil companies, essentially for offshore drilling. It's supposed to put about $900 million in a fund that is used to preserve and protect land and water across this great country of ours. Unfortunately, over the last few years, decades even, Congress very rarely lets the full funding of this fund take place. Instead, they use it as a slush fund, and they take that money and they use it for other pet projects. I think that's wrong. So I would vote for the fund. I support fully funding the fund and think that it should be used for its stated purpose, which is conserving the land and water of this great country to make sure we're all able to enjoy it going forward.
Hello, Bryan.
Hello, Star.
Hello, everyone. I'm Star Moffitt, and my question is to you, Bryan. It's related to Social Security.
Sure.
Since I'm now becoming part of the older American population, one of the things that has happened to me as an American citizen, I've been working since age 13. So I've been paying into the system since age 13. And I have noticed every time I receive a quarterly review from Social Security Administration, the threshold for me to retire keeps changing. So at one point it was 67, and now I can't retire until 74, or I can't pull out the money that I have put into the system until age 74. So my question to you is, what would you do to reform Social Security Administration? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Preserving and protecting Social Security and Medicare is one of what will be my top focuses in Congress. I think these are sacred promises that we have made to our community, and we need to make sure we protect that. And so when Congressman Knight says he thinks Social Security is a bad idea, I couldn't disagree more strongly. I think it's a great idea. I think it's the greatest program, or one of the greatest programs our country has ever put forward, and it's kept tens of millions of seniors able to live out their later years in dignity and respect. And there are a lot of things we can do to make sure that we don't raise the retirement age. I will not vote to raise the retirement age. I will not vote to cut benefits. I will vote to change the way we calculate the cost of living adjustments. As an earlier questionnaire discussed, it's not enough. And so right now they use what's called a CPIW cost of living increase, which takes into account the regular expenses of a clerical or office worker. I support a CPIE. That's for elderly. It takes into account the normal costs that elderly people have, really focusing on health care and how much more expensive that is. So we are increasing benefits, making sure that people are able to provide for themselves in those later years. And we can do that by raising the cap, fully funding the system at least through 2070, and making sure that we do protect these essential programs. Sure. That's a great question, and it's a really hard question. There's a lot of dysfunction, and it's very easy sitting here and looking back and seeing what happens and just getting frustrated. Because on both parties, on both sides, there are far too many politicians who it seems like just go there to hold out for extremists and donors and fight against each other. And I think that's wrong. And what we need is a representative who's going to go to Congress and who's going to fight for people in the community and not for those big donors. I practice as an attorney, and in my career as an attorney, I've represented Democrats and Republicans, and I've looked at, worked with a diverse group of people on the cases in order to look at the evidence, look at the facts, and find the best result that's going to work out for the people you represent. That's exactly what I want to do in Washington, to stand up to those corporate interests, to stand up to the career politicians, and make sure that we're saying, no, not this time. You're not going to be able to hold up a Supreme Court nominee and not even have a vote. You're not going to be able to just pass this, banking loophole so that people get a tax write-off when they fly on a private jet. You're going to start looking out for the people back home, and that's what I'm going to focus on.
Please state your names. I'm missing people's names.
Hi, Sandra.
In case you haven't noticed, I'm asking the same questions, so if you haven't spoken yet. Steve Knight just dropped the Castaic Wilderness from his bill, leaving the St. Francis Dam Disaster Memorial as a standalone bill. Would you have handled this differently?
Sure. Well, I want to start by saying I support the memorial. And so I think that's good, and I support the memorial moving forward. I also, however, support, building off my last answer about the Conservation Fund and how important it is to preserve and protect the wilderness in this country. I support adding protected lands. And what we need to do is make sure that we are bringing all of the important constituencies together to discuss these issues. Because here, there's been a holdup because there's some disagreements among environmental groups, among bicyclists, among some of the affected constituencies. So what we need is a member of Congress who's going to have that open door, who's going to call the bicyclists in, the Sierra Club in, the experts and local leaders in the community in, so they can sit together, have a discussion, and find the best way to protect as much space as possible as we move forward. That's what I'd focus on in Congress.
Hi, my name is Nanette Meister.
Hi, Nanette.
And I think there's a gigantic disconnect between our elected officials and the people you're supposed to serve. One of the things I would like to know is, would you ever do town home style meetings where you come out to our communities and actually there's Santa Clarita, there's Palmdale, Lancaster, Porter Ranch, and Simi Valley. Would you make the effort to come to all those communities and try to get feedback and listen to what we say? Because right now, there's no way Steve Knight would ever listen to anything anybody has to say.
Oh, absolutely. Not just, what was that?
Is that a promise?
Yes, that's absolutely a promise. And not just those town halls, but I think we need to have frequent town halls, just like this right here, where the community is able to come forward and ask their questions. I think this is a great forum, not just when running for office, but when you're in office. And you need to have an open door policy. You need to do telephone town halls when you're back in Washington, because sometimes your job does require you to be there. But then when you come back, you need to make an effort to go to all parts of this. This is a big geographic district, from Simi Valley up to Palmdale, Lancaster, and even east from there. And you need to make sure you're having the town halls, you're speaking with anybody who has a question, letting them know what you're doing and where you stand, and making sure we're all working together to move forward. So that's a promise. I'll be hosting town halls when I'm in office.
Elaine Vallis, I was wondering, you said that you wanted to support Social Security and Medicare, which does come out of our checks. How are we going to get more money when many of the people can't even work?
You're asking how can you get more... okay, so if you raise the cap, right now it's capped at $118,500. It stops being taxed at that point. So if a person makes $25 million, they pay 6.2% on $118,500. They don't pay a cent more for the other $24.99 million they made, okay? That's a regressive tax. The people who are making less are paying more. And so if we eliminate that cap and we raise it, it will fully fund Social Security beyond 2070. And so we can make that small change. It only hits about 6% of the population, and it will fully fund Social Security going forward for the next 60 years. And so you can make a change like that, and you can bring great benefits while strengthening and securing Social Security so that all the people in our community who are living on a fixed income are able to better take care of themselves as they go forward.
Well, how do you feel on Measure E?
Sure. Well, I think that might be the next question anyway. I don't know, but I'm going off of the T-shirt.
You got to state your name.
Well, first of all, I want to welcome you and your wife to our community.
Steve, would you state your name?
I'm Steve Betzel.
Thank you.
From Science, California. My question today is really going to come at Measure E from a different standpoint. That's you've been involved in lawsuits against Bank of America for mortgage fraud involving Countrywide. Is that correct?
Not Bank of America, but similar cases, yeah.
Okay.
Question, Steve.
I'm really concerned.
All right, that was the question.
I didn't sound like a question.
I'm really concerned about securities fraud regarding bonds issued through these Prop 39 bonds. There is not full disclosure to the taxpayers who are going to pay them.
Your question is?
What efforts will you take in the Congress to revise security laws so that make sure that voters have full disclosure on Prop 39 bonds? And I thank you.
Okay. Well, there are a lot of parts to that question. I think it's absolutely essential. We do need to reform our securities laws. There are tons of abuses taking place on a daily basis where these banks and other hedge funds are issuing shady deals, whether it's mortgage-backed securities, whether it's others, where they are taking advantage of people, and we need to strengthen Dodd-Frank. We need to impose greater enforcement. That means making sure that the SEC is fully funded and staffed, because they're not going to be able to look into these issues when there aren't enough people there to do their job. And so you need to make sure that you have the people there who can do it. You need to make sure that you are overseeing these types of issues so that people aren't going forward and taking advantage of people. Now, on Measure E, I support Measure E because I support community colleges. And I think we do need to I support Measure E, and the great thing about a measure like this is it's put up to a vote of the people in the community who are given the opportunity to say how they feel on this. And this, in my opinion, is a wonderful opportunity to add essential services and facilities to help the students at this school and students going forward at this school to make sure we're continuing to train and educate the people in this community to be able to work great jobs going forward.
Thank you.
My name is Andrew DeBon.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi. In regards to education, how would you improve Title I and other federal education programs?
Sure. So public school is very important to me. Went to public school my whole life. Both my parents were public school teachers. Since 2011, school funding at the federal level has been cut by 20%. I think that's outrageous. I think this is one of, if not the most important thing we need to be investing in at a local level, but at the federal level. And so when I'm in Congress, I will not be voting to continue cutting federal education. I will make sure that we are fully funding schools. We are... I will make sure that we are continuing to fully fund, not cut. And we're doing great in this community. You just saw in the paper today about Saugus schools, 14 out of 15 getting a gold ribbon. That's wonderful, and we're doing great with less. Imagine what we would be able to do if we were fully funded with more. And so that's one thing that I'll be focusing on, making sure that we are fully funded, we are not cutting anymore, and we're investing in the future of our society.
Hello, my name is Chelsea. I'm wondering if you would vote to overturn Citizens United.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, it's not quite so easy to vote to overturn it, but I have taken a pledge to support a constitutional amendment to overturn it. Now, right now, it looks like we might not need a constitutional amendment because there's an opening on the Supreme Court, and if the Senate will do its job and confirm a good Supreme Court justice, then we might be able to overturn this very shortly. But I've taken a pledge to overturn it, and I'm supported by a group called End Citizens United, whose sole purpose is to try to get dark money out of politics. Because it is a terrible, terrible system right now when you have these big corporations who are able to funnel unlimited money. You have the Koch brothers talking about putting $880 million into this election to try to override the voice of the people. That's wrong. Steve Knight, up to this point in the cycle, has collected more than 50% of his contributions, the money he's collected from corporations and other special interest PACs. More than 50% of the money he's gotten, that's where it's coming from. I'm proud that more than 97% of my contributions are coming from individuals. And we need to make sure we're fighting against that dark money, that outside spending, and we are giving voice to the people and standing up against that dark interest.
Okay, getting back to Measure E, which is another tax. Why do you feel that a tax of just a certain area, since schools are now open, anybody can come here? Why should this area be the only area that's taxed because it's on that property? It's not really going for any more students, it's going for buildings, which could be used on other days, but they admitted that they cut it down. So I just think it's unfair to just tax this community when it's an open community where anybody in the state of California could come here. And if that's the case, then they should do what they do at other systems or whatever. If it's not going to be local and you're coming from somewhere else, then you should have to pay more like a UC system. I went to private schools the whole time, so I paid for my education.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. And there are other ways that you can go about funding schools, and it's frankly unfortunate that we need to result in specific taxes like this because Sacramento and Washington politicians aren't doing their job. And they are cutting funding, as we just discussed. That's a problem. But right now, this is an investment that we can make in this community that will improve the school in this community. And even if the students are coming from elsewhere, it's going to train those students better. It's going to allow them to get jobs in this community better. It's going to attract other people to come to this area because of this improved school. But the wonderful thing about our system is that for people who disagree with it, they're given the direct opportunity to go to the polls, to protest and raise questions against it, and show people and talk to people about why they think it's a bad idea. I happen to think it's a good idea and think that it will improve the school and it will bring necessary services. And, you talked earlier about the fact that being on a fixed income, it's hard to make those payments. And that goes hand in hand with what I talked about strengthening and securing Social Security, increasing the cost of living adjustments so that there would be in that scenario, more money coming into the fixed income so that you hopefully would be able to cover some of those costs.
But if the bonds are already trading, we have no say.
Next questioner, please. Don't answer that.
Hi, Patty Sulpizian.
Hi, Patty.
Hi, Bryan. If elected to Congress, would you vote or support legislation to reinstate the assault weapons ban?
I think we absolutely need common sense gun safety legislation. I think that's a great example of one. I think that we need to, right off the bat, make sure that we bring funding back to the CDC so that they are able to conduct research on what are the best methods to protect our communities from this needless gun violence. California is doing that now. The federal government, Republicans 30 years ago, prevented it from happening. We need to bring that back. I also think we need to have increased waiting periods, and we need to have full background checks, increasing the funding at the agencies that conduct those background checks so that they're staffed and they can move quickly. And then we need to make sure that potential suspected terrorists are not able to purchase guns in our community. And that's a big difference between myself and Steve Knight. Now, he has voted 10 times in order to allow potential suspected terrorists to continue purchasing weapons. And as we saw with San Bernardino and how this can strike at home, that's absolutely unacceptable. It puts our families at risk, and we need to stand up against that. So I would support that bill, and I would support those other common sense safety measures as well.
My question, specifically the assault weapons.
Yeah, that's what I said. I would support that bill.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Hello, Bryan. My name is Sebastian Bentling from Saugus.
Hi, Sebastian.
As a current master's student pursuing a degree in public policy and from one UCLA graduate to another, what specific reforms do you plan to orchestrate in order to help student loan reform?
Sure, thank you for that question, and go Bruins. Student loan debt is a huge problem, and it's acting as an albatross that hangs around the neck of far too many people, that hangs with them for 20, 30, 40 years. And so one thing we can do right away is make sure that student loans can be refinanced. It makes absolutely no sense why you can refinance a car or a house loan, but you can't refinance a student loan. I also support allowing student loans to be dischargeable in bankruptcy. You know, right now they are not. And so, unfortunately, many of these schools, they take none of the responsibility on making sure that they're teaching people and getting them into a position where they can have a job to pay back the loans, because they're never at risk. And the bank can just give loans to anybody they want because they know it will ultimately be paid back. But if it's dischargeable in bankruptcy, it puts the onus not on a 17 or 18-year-old kid who's deciding what school to go to. It puts it on the school and the bank making sure that they're providing a program and an education that is going to teach the student and allow them to go forward with the job where they can pay back that student loan. So those are a few of the changes I would make to try to take some of this burden away from our student graduates today.
So let's give Mr. Caforio a big hand for his 20 minutes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone for coming here. Thank you to the CCAC for doing such a great job putting this together. As discussed earlier, I do pledge to come back for town halls when I am in Congress, because I think events like this are so critical to answer questions directly from the people in the community, to discuss what really matters, and to make sure that we are all moving forward together in this community as we go forward. And that's really what the problem is with our representative right now in Steve Knight. In that time and time again, he is standing up for the corporations, for the special interests, for the dysfunction in Washington, and against the people in this community. And that's why I'm running, and that's why Lisa and I decided that we would get into this race and try to build that economy that works for everyone and not just the wealthy few. That means that instead of stating that you have no problem deporting the parents of American citizens, as Steve Knight has said, I will fight for families, and I will fight for comprehensive immigration reform to make sure we don't tear apart families, but we bring 11 to 12 million people out of the shadows so they can participate in the economy, so we can all move forward together. It means having comprehensive criminal justice reform. While practicing and working for a United States federal judge, I saw how broken our criminal justice system is, and how too many Latino and African American men are being taken away from their families and sent away because of draconian mandatory minimum sentences. We need to fix that, and we need to make sure we aren't continuing to lose these people in our community from being a part of our community. That's why when Steve Knight says that he thinks that Social Security was a bad idea, he's so out of touch and so misguided about what matters to the people in this community. Social Security is one of the greatest programs we've ever had. It has let tens of millions of seniors live out their years. Today, it brings 3 million children out of poverty. And Steve Knight thinks that's a bad idea. That's who we have representing us in Congress right now. Someone who thinks providing so much help and lifting so many people up is a bad idea. That's wrong. He's a bad idea. We can do something about that. We can work together. We can bring a representative to Washington who will fight for the people and not for the special interests. My name is Bryan Caforio. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your questions. I hope to earn your vote on June 7th and again in November. Thank you.